And joining me now is a Sky favourite who needs literally no introduction. It's the outgoing, soon-to-retire member for the seat of Hunter in our federal parliament, Joel Fitzgibbon. And he joins me this evening from the Hunter Valley. Joel Fitzgibbon, welcome to the McGregor Angle. Great to have you aboard.
Thanks, Catherine. Great to be here.
Well, Joel, old saying in my former profession in the military, never interrupt your opponent when he's making a mistake. You must be sitting back watching the tensions in the coalition over net zero with some bemusement. You have fought the fight on behalf of fossil fuels and the jobs in particular of coal miners and Labor's traditional base. If you were in Barnaby Joyce's shoes, what would you be doing on Sunday?
Well, I certainly have fought the good fight and I will continue to do so. I'd be fibbing if I didn't say I was watching on with some enjoyment as the coalition has a fight amongst itself. We've got the shit out the OK corral, of course, on Sunday when the Nats meet to decide whether they will support Scott Morrison's 2050 ambition. I'm also feeling a little bit vindicated because in November of 2019, I made a speech saying that basically Labor has to take the target off its back. It's in opposition. It should let the government take the lead on climate change, let it do the fighting and see what comes next. You might remember I suggested we match their ambition on the medium-term target so that the focus could be entirely on them rather than on us. Well, I got my wish. The focus is entirely on them. The Nats have got a big challenge ahead of them. The interesting thing, of course, is that the people who are most vocally opposed to net zero emissions are the people in the National Party who are closest to Joyce. So that might be a saving grace for him at the end of the day. They will, of course, not want to do damage to the person they support most. But it's an extraordinary situation. And look, this is a long shot, but you can foresee the circumstances where the Nationals walk away from the coalition. They would, of course, pledge both supply and confidence in the House so that the government didn't fall. It would be an extraordinary thing to do. If you go back, of course, you know your political history very well. In the early days of Federation, it happened regularly. And of course, it would give Scott Morrison an opportunity to go to Government House, to call an election and to seek a mandate on his proposition for zero net emissions by 2050, which of course is quite popular in the electorate.
Well, Joel, and we've both got a sense of history. I'm old enough to remember your dad holding that seat and give you both a clean bill of health on branch stacking too, by the way, when I used to get with great joy go up to the FEC there when your dad was around. But your point's well made. I'm actually wondering, on this program, I discussed with Michael Kroger that state result in Upper Hunter, which I'm sure you watched closely. And I thought, reading between the lines, that was pretty ominous for the federal ALP. And yet the coalition's turned itself inside out, as you've correctly identified. Do you think it's possible they might go for three-cornered contests again? That's happened in my lifetime, and it might be the only way to put a bit of a floor under the Conservative vote.
I've been surprised, for example, that they haven't run both Libs and Nats in my own seat of Hunter over the course of the last two elections. I'll be surprised if they don't do it again. I mean, the coalition agreement doesn't preclude the Libs from running in Hunter because it's not a coalition-held seat. And it's a very disparate electorate. Down one end, the Lake Macquarie end, it's relatively progressive, and the further you go up the valley, the more conservative it becomes, or the community at least is more attuned or closer to the coal mining industry. So it would make sense to run a Lib down. I fear now I'm giving them ideas, but I'm sure they've thought about this themselves. A Lib down the lake and a Nat attracting votes further up the valley. But it is extraordinary. But the people misinterpreted that Upper Hunter by-election. Yes, I was very frustrated by it. Not by the result so much, because we never really expected to win it. But the way in which I found coal miners hadn't yet forgiven the Labor Party for its perceived departure from them and their interest. Now, a lot of that is perceived, and a lot of it was generated, of course, by a scare campaign, but still the same. I've said this many times before. On the polling booths there, people were saying, coal miners were saying to me, "G'day, Fitzy, how are you going? You're doing a good job, but what's going on with your party? I see they're still in bed with the Greens." Now that wasn't caused by anything the Labor Party did of late. It's just an overhang from the Adani wars and those, the wedding ceremony with Bob Brown in 2010. Remember, with the waddle on the lapel, signing up an agreement to be in government. They just haven't forgotten that. And we have to shout support for them very loudly and do a few things in support of them before we can expect them to come back to us. That's what I found during the Upper Hunter by-election.
And Joel, a couple of times you've made this point. Once in an exchange in the party room that did leak out about a confrontation you had with Mark Dreyfus, talking about the more privileged wing of the party, that you and I remember the period when branches were actually comprised of people who worked with their hands. That is not so much the case anymore. Are there other MPs who share your concerns remaining in the parliament, or will you be a lone voice until you depart at the next election? Do you have, the so-called Otis Group, for instance, did that gather momentum, and are there others who will still fight that corner in the next parliament when, quite likely, Anthony Albanese could be PM?
Well, I'm not so sure I'm supposed to be talking about the Otis Group, but I suppose as a departing MP, I can do whatever I like, Catherine, can't I? The Otis Group, I'm sure you'd like to encourage me. The Otis Group is alive and well, and there are many people still left on the more conservative side of politics who have fond memories of where the party began and, where we should keep our focus. And that, of course, is those who work in the high vis and in the blue collar. But there are many good regional people. Meryl Swanson, my neighbour, for example, is a very strong champion of the coal mining industry. But other conservative people like Don Farrell and Senator Ralph Ciccone, I better stop naming them. I might get someone into trouble. But they are there. But the challenge for the Labor Party, of course, is that it is now dominated by more progressive people. I mean, the right notionally holds the majority in the caucus, but some people in the right are themselves very, very progressive. You mentioned one in Mark Dreyfus. It's just extraordinary to hear that, for most people to hear that he's a member of the right. I mean, really? They dominate the caucus, and it's a constant battle for people like me and those who travel with me to keep us on the even keel. I've got to say, Anthony Albanese has done a good job pulling us back to the centre over the course of the last 2.5 years. And if he can stay on that trajectory, well, he's a very good chance of winning this next election.
And and I agree with you, that those polling numbers seem to be obstinately tracking at about 53 to 47 two-party preferred. Joel Fitzgibbon, this has been a terrific chat. It's been way too long. I'd like to just part with one thought, because you were Defence Minister at one point, and I know you developed an incredible affection and respect for the members of the Special Forces community. Any parting thoughts for some of those guys who are really under the pump at the moment? We're going into Veterans Health Week, and I know you came up to me at the Minerals Council dinner and said to keep up the work in the veterans space. Any message for the boys from the West who are under the pump at the moment?
Well, there's a message for them, and there is a message for politicians. The message for them is that they have our unqualified support, and we honour and respect and thank them for everything they've done for the nation. The message for the politicians is that every decision should be guided by those same things. That is, what those people have done and sacrificed for our country, not for themselves, but because they were asked to do. They are all volunteers, and we should keep that front and centre in our minds when every discussion is taking place and when every decision is made.
Well, I couldn't ask for more, and nor could they. I'm in touch with a lot of them. Joel Fitzgibbon, thank you for making time on a Friday. I know it's not your preferred day to work in the media and do stuff, but terrific to have you. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon, I hope. All the best.
Thanks, Catherine.